Once again, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Duncan Wood. I'm the director of the Mexico Institute here at the Wilson Center, and delighted to be able to moderate this next panel with two of our closest friends, gentlemen who have helped us out enormously over the years. We find ourselves on the same side in many policy conversations and in the public debate. So it's a great delight to have back with us Representative Henry Cuellar. Congressman, it's wonderful to have you here. Thank you for all the help that you've given us. Thank you for all the conversations we've had on and off the record about Mexico and the border. And it's always a delight, of course, to see you not just in Washington, but down in Mexico when we happen to coincide there as well.
We'll be there later in August or September again.
Wonderful, wonderful. And Representative Will Hurd, also of Texas. Congressman, once again, thank you for always being willing to come here to engage in debate. And I know that the two of you have developed quite the tag team over the past couple of years on these issues. And it's one of the reasons why we love having you both here. And as I said to you just now in our little green room, the less that I talk on this panel, the better. So feel free to engage in conversation between you.
Well, I've learned Henry usually takes 80% of the time, and I get 20. He leaves me about 20%. So.
But it's all pure gold, right? There you go. So listen, why don't we get straight into it? The title of the panel is sufficiently vague that we can talk about anything. We have pragmatic policymaking for border region residents and the nation. And when I spoke to your staffers on the phone, they said, all right, give me some clue about what that means. And I said, well, I'm going to take it in this direction. And so here's the first question for you, and it's for you both. The border now, perhaps more than ever, is a controversial issue here in Washington. It's in the headlines. That means that there's an opportunity to focus on it, which is fantastic. But very often the conversation gets sidetracked into questions of party politics. How do you best represent the interests of your electoral districts, of your constituents at a time like this? How do you get the message across about what the reality is like on the border?
Well, I think the same way we should represent not only the border, but any part of this of our district is do your job and represent the district. Because again, I've always said this, if you send members, House members or senators to come in and ask one question, what does my party want me to do? Then you're not going to be representing the district. I'm a Democrat, you're a Republican, Will's a Republican, and what we do is, we understand party loyalty, but at the same time, the loyalty that we should adhere to is the country and the best interest of the district that we represent. And there are situations, and I think Will knows of some of his situations. In my situation, when some of my party want open borders, or other folks on the other side that want to militarize the border, it's wrong. The best thing to do is to listen to the folks that do this on a day-to-day basis. And if you listen to the folks on a day-to-day basis, you're going to do the right thing. And if you have to go against a party, then you got to do that. But you got to represent your district.
I always tell people the president's not my boss. The head of my party is not my boss. The minority leader is not my boss. It's the 800,000 people that I represent. And, I think when it comes to the border, I always try to, I wish there was a rule where you can't talk about the border unless you've been to the border, right? That would make things a lot easier.
I like that.
And you got to go more than one time too, right? But there's a number of perspectives that is important to get, and those perspectives are different. You have federal law enforcement, you have local law enforcement, you have landowners, and then you have businesses that are operating back and forth across the border. And so sometimes our colleagues, when they go down, they only get one of those perspectives. Mm-hmm. And to truly understand how diverse the border actually is, you should be getting all of those perspectives. And Henry lives there. He's been there his entire life. I spend so much time up and down, having more border than anybody else. We constantly get those different perspectives, mm-hmm. and that informs the decisions that we make. And then also do the right thing. I think because both Henry and I are unafraid to go against party dogma, that makes it actually easier for our partnership on a lot of these issues. And another person we have to recognize, I think, John Cornyn. John Cornyn really does understand these issues and is oftentimes partner on a lot of these initiatives that we're working on.
Yeah, you know, and Will's right about this thing. It's interesting. The people that live the furthest from the border are the ones that have the most interesting solutions to the border. I mean, you're absolutely right on that. And I love this. On appropriations, I mean, Will represents the longest border of any other member. Spends a lot of time at the border. So when I hear members in appropriations say, well, you know, I went to the border. 2 hours. You know, I went down to the border and I know this and I know this and all this. I've been down to the border. You know, my response, well, I live at the border. Yeah. I drink the water. I don't think this is Rio Grande water, you know, but, you know, I breathe the air. I have a family there. And so I know the border. So I always get a kick out of folks that go in and get this little snapshot, you know, a couple hours. And then they go in. And like when they go to the border, what do? Usually talk to Border Patrol, and Border Patrol. And nothing wrong with that. I'm a big supporter of the Border Patrol folks. But you got to also talk to the stakeholders. Yeah. I mean, the last time when I was on the conference committee, they wanted to do Border Patrol and one. I said, nope, we're going to go to ports of entry. And we went down to the ports of entry. I said, and you also are going to hear from the stakeholders. You recall we brought some of the Sam Bell and other folks, the mayor, Pt.3, and other folks, Jim Darlin, brought them in. You got to get this perspective that Will's talking about. But you can't go in and spend a couple hours and say you know it better than the people that live this on a day-to-day basis.
And if your agenda included taking a picture on a boat with a 50 cal gun, then you know your motivations may have been a little bit off in trying to understand what's going on. The other thing that's also we have to be mindful of is the situation changes constantly, right? And so understanding those nuances, understanding how the communities are being impacted by this, and you know this is why Henry has been championing this initiative to make sure that our cities and counties and philanthropic organizations get reimbursed for their work in taking responsibility and taking over some of the job that the federal government should be doing. And so, making sure that those understanding how they're handling this. And each community is handling it different. Each community has a different perspective. You know, one of my cities is dealing with 1,200 people that have, been here illegally every day. Another community has 40 every other week. And so each community is being impacted in a different way. And what you're hearing from all of them is they're overworked. Border Patrol is swamped with work. ICE is swamped with work. CBP is swamped with work. The communities, like San Antonio, some of the city employees are spending 10 hours a week working on dealing with handling the people that are transiting through San Antonio. So that is this is a complicated issue, and we have immediate short-term goals that need to be fixed. We have long-term issues, and ultimately, the long-term cause for this is lack of economic opportunity. It is violence and extreme poverty in the Northern Triangle. And until we address those issues, we shouldn't be cutting our foreign aid budgets to those countries. We should be increasing them. I actually think there should be a special representative for the Northern Triangle, have a senior diplomat that can negotiate with those three countries, work with OPIC, USAID, and State Department to focus all of our resources, all levers of government to solve that problem. We also, this is not just a problem for the U.S. and Mexico, it's a problem for the Western Hemisphere, and so we need to get the rest. Where is Organization of American States? Where is IDB? To make sure that we're solving those issues that is pushing folks here. Now, because we're treating everybody like an asylum seeker, you have people from all over the country, all over the world trying to come here. But the long-term issue we haven't done enough against is that area.
In 2014, when the unaccompanied kids came in, I think we're doing a good job. He hasn't said anything yet.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
So
I'm going to step down in a second.
And there's a group of us that went down to the border of Guatemala and Mexico. At that time, there was a general named John Kelly there. That as you know, he became the chief of staff, and he at that time, I think he still does, but he understands the way this works. And so we came back and Kay Granger, Republican, Fort Worth, myself, in appropriations, we put in $750 million for the Northern Triangle. And it's been at 750, and as you know, Rebecca and Anthony, it got reduced. We have a president that wanted to bring it down to zero, and it's a mistake, because if you don't address those root problems, we need to do that. So we sat down with the three countries, and we came up with an appropriation process. You cannot say, we're going to threaten you and cut this off, because as Will said, this is what you have to do. You have to address the issues. I've always said, if you want to play football on the 1 yard line called the U.S. Mexico border, where we spend over $18 billion a year, they're going to score a lot more, because all they have to come in, especially when people that don't understand the border, that the boundary is in the middle of the Rio Grande. And if you're talking about the Rio Grande and you put a wall or a fence, usually it's half a mile away because of the levee. So, and sometimes, because of the flooding issues. So even if you put it half a mile, sometimes further away, somebody crosses, touches the bank, they go up, walk half a mile to the wall and say, hey, Border Patrol, here I am, take me around. And then, just like you said, asylum, credible fear. It's a different type of individual. And I'll just say this, and then you continue talking. No, I'm just kidding. But look, the profile of the individuals coming in has changed drastically. In 2006, and I know Anthony and Roberta know this very well. In 2006, 90% of the people coming in were Mexicanos. Within hours, 95% of the people will be returned. Now, 73 plus are Central Americans and others. It's not a Mexican problem, as the president puts it. It's other folks coming in. Now 97% of the people who come in stay. So in the past, we would send back, and now over here. Then in 2006, 10% of the people coming in were unaccompanied kids or family units. Now it's over 61% that are family and unaccompanied kids. And again, as you mentioned, and I know there's different numbers out there, but I'll use the numbers from the immigration courts. If you have 100 people and a judge will hear their case, and 88% of them are going to be rejected. 12%, we should say, bienvenidos. Or nowadays, you got people from all over the country, so whatever language it might be. That's what we need to understand. And I know we got our embassy here, the Mexican embassy, and a great working relationship. But I've always said this problem is not only a U.S., because it's going to become a Mexican problem. Because what we're seeing in 2014, we did a couple things, Kay Ranger, myself. We added the money for the $750 million. We shifted over $80 million to help secure the southern border with Mexico. With those $80 million, Mexico was stopping at one time more people than Border Patrol was. Did you know that? More people. Now it's about 250,000? I don't know if it's going to go up, but they're stopping about 250,000 people at the southern border. This is what we need to do, extend the perimeters, work with our friends in Mexico, work with the Central American countries. And if we do that, instead of playing defense on the 1 yard line, then it's going to work on that. So
I'm gonna call.
Yeah, you're gonna cut it.
You gotta cut flag. Whatever it is you do in American-style football, I forget. I'll blow my whistle in soccer, okay? And just I want to ask this one question. So Mexico has recently agreed to take on a lot more of the burden of stopping Central Americans as they make their way up through the country, and yet we heard from the administration here that there is no new money to help Mexico to do that. And one of the concerns that I have is that Mexico is already stretched pretty thin. They're going through times of fiscal austerity. Their institutions, particularly in the area of migration, are not the strongest. They have capacity, but as I say, they're already stretched. Where is the conversation here in Washington about actually trying to reach out and to help the Mexicans? Because they need help in terms of financial resources, they need help in terms of technology, need help in terms of human capital. And I'm not hearing that conversation here in Washington. Everybody's focusing either on what's happening on the U.S. border or what's happening in Central America, whereas the game has kind of changed in the past couple of weeks.
Well,
yeah, the conversation isn't happening, right? On specifically on how to help Mexico. Henry, I don't know if you're privy to.
I can give you some history, and again, excuse me for being very blunt with our Mexican friends. Look, there are 5 countries in the world that get what I call, they're part of the $1 billion club. Israel, $3.5 billion. I mean, they're the biggest recipients of foreign aid, over 3.5. Then you got Pakistan, we've been having trouble with Pakistan. You have Egypt. Then you have also, help me out on that, Afghanistan. It used to be Iraq, but now it's Afghanistan. Then the number 5 is a low country by the name of Jordan. Mm-hmm. Let me tell you how Jordan does it. They come in and they go into the Foreign Affairs Appropriations, the subcommittees, very quietly. So the president or the king will come in, go see his son at Georgetown, go see the president, and then he comes in and talks. So he's got very sophisticated. He'll come in with charts, never ask for money. He'll say, we got all the Syrians, refugees, and all that. Then the embassy works behind the scenes, and then before you know it, boom, over $1 billion. So I've presented this to the Mexicanos since many years, as you know, as Anthony, you and I talked about it. So under the Peña Nieto, we were there with the president. Mr. President, man, I can't get any of you folks. I understand the sovereignty. I understand the sensitivity, but we can do this quietly. We can work with you on that. So I invited Osorio Chong, said, I'll be there, never showed up. Well, I shouldn't mention this, but I invited about 4 secretaries, and they all said, I'll be there, and they never showed up. And the invitation is still there. And again, I understand sovereignty. I understand the sensitivities. So we have tried, and I've added a little bit of money here, another 10 million here. Try to do money for education exchanges. We've added this. The only way we can get this is to have the Mexicanos. I mean, with all due respect, they'll see the ambassador, but they want to see somebody in, not to ask for money, but just say this is a problem. I think this is a perfect time that we can help them. Especially in the southern border, if we can understand the sovereignty, the sensitivity, and get this. Or there's some of us have been trying this for a long time. And Anthony, you know this, Ambassador, we have tried this for a long time. And again, I know the sensitivities. I'll keep emphasizing all that. But if we could do that and understand this is a co-responsibility, because it's not only Central Americans, but again, you know what's happening with folks down there in the South. In fact, I was there with Toratayo Guillen, meeting with him, where he gets his phone call. He says, 1,300 Cubans just busted because they said, we're entitled to go to the U.S. and you're not going to stop us. And, so you're getting people from different parts of the world because they're understanding what? All you have to do is come to the southern border. There's almost no immigration judges at the border, which I think the Trump and the Obama administration do it backwards. They put judges where people end up with. My thing is they ought to put judges at the beginning. I think I've added 315 judges, and only a couple have gone down to the border, and they're doing this backwards. If you don't hold people, give them their day in court, and the 88% they're going to be rejected, and you send them back, this is going to continue coming.
And do it last in, first out. The first in, first in, first out. Mm-hmm. Right. So, last in, first out. You want to do the people that are coming in now, send them back as quickly as possible, because that gets the message back there. I will add an asterisk to all this. There was a 2,000 person caravan coming up to the U.S. border through Pt.3. That's on the other side of Eagle Pass. And all the federal law enforcement at the time, cooperation with the government of Mexico, kept using the word unprecedented cooperation. Mm-hmm. The city, the state was intimately involved in changing their tactics and how they dealt with this, and you didn't see any of those folks cross. The mayors and governors in Mexico are starting to feel this pressure, because some of the support that has been giving to these people that are coming through their country illegally is getting more support than some of the folks locally. And so this is creating a broader political issue and pressure for the López Obrador government to have to deal with. So that's another factor. But let's also not overcomplicate this. 144,000 people came into this country. Why is last month? The month before that was 109. The month before that was 103. We're at about 500,000 for the entire year. For context, all of last year was 400,000. Why is we're seeing an increase in numbers? Yes, it's everybody's being treated like an asylum seeker, even though they're not treating asylum. But also, the kingpin human smugglers have gotten better at moving people from Tegu to El Paso. And so 144,000 people last month had the phone number of a human smuggler. They had a license plate of the bus that they were supposed to get on. They had the pickup location in those cities that they were supposed to go in. Why are we not collecting that information, getting it to our intelligence community in order to work with our allies, not just in Mexico, but in the other places, to stop this infrastructure and dismantle the infrastructure that is moving people in bulk? These human smugglers making $7,000 a head. They used to have you had 3 chances, right? Because a couple of years ago, you would always get deported. And so the human smuggler for $7,000, you'd get 3 tries. Now they have a 100% success rate. So they're making more money on this, and we are not doing anything to tackle this issue. This administration should make countering human smuggling, and specifically when it comes to this problem on our border, a national intelligence priority so that we can focus some of our intelligence resources on this. This is not Al-Qaeda hiding in caves. These are people that have to be in contact with folks. We have hundreds of thousands of people who have already been in contact with them. So we should be able to do more to dismantle this. And this can be done within the existing budgets of all the countries along the way. And all of our allies would be willing to work on that issue if we're driving the intelligence on that. And it's DHS's responsibility to collect that information and get it into the hands of the national intelligence infrastructure, and it's their job to go out and solve this problem there. That is not happening right now. And I've asked the question hundreds of times. Nobody's given me a good answer on why that isn't happening.
If I can just add one more thing. On this Northern Triangle, and I'm not happy that it got reduced from $750 million to, I think it's $520 million. I think our vision is to expand this to the southern part of Mexico. So it's the Northern Triangle, the southern part of Mexico. If we can increase the money and help that area, I think it would go a long way. And again, you have to thank the Mexicanos, because when the president was saying that the Mexicanos were not doing anything, if you're stopping 250,000 people a year, that's a lot. And they could always play Matador. Ole, just go in. Just go in and then make it harder for us, because again, it's not Border Patrol. Our good men and women that do their job at the border, it's a tough job. They're not trying to evade. They're coming in and say, here I am. Groups coming in. So it's, Well's right on this. We just have to understand we have to address this. And then the other thing, look, and I know we got 2 ambassadors here that were there in Mexico, Roberta and Anthony. I mean, we got to go back to the institutional memories that we had. Remember working with Rebecca on Plan Merida, the Merida, and other folks that we've been working. I mean, we got to work with our friends to Mexico. And I'll say this over. When you treat Mexico as an enemy and Russia as an ally, the world has been turned upside down. Yeah. If we have an ally that's so important to us, it's going to be our friends to the south, and we got to treat them with the respect and dignity on that thing.
I think you probably just blew up Twitter, so that's great. I want to bring the conversation back to the border here, the southwest border. And you both talked about the importance of listening to stakeholders. And you've hinted at the diversity of stakeholders as well. And of course, we have a room full of stakeholders here today, which is one of the most important achievements of this annual event, as it's taken place over the past 6 years, is that it's a gathering of stakeholders from the border, but here in Washington. And it doesn't really happen in that way. We have delegations, individual delegations, but these are people from across the border. But I want to ask about the past couple of weeks. We've been through essentially a game of chicken between the U.S. administration and the Mexican counterparts over tariffs and migration. What were people, the electorate, your constituents saying in border communities about what was happening? And what was the expectation of what might come out of that kind of negotiation between Mexico and the United States over the use of tariffs to try to force Mexico to increase its efforts on migration?
Well, First and foremost, what group like this needs to do, there is some basic information that we have to continue to communicate to the voting population. Most people don't realize that a tariff is a tax on the American consumer. They don't understand how that is going to impact. And the best way I've been able to describe it is, the cost of a cold beer on a hot day is going to increase if this happens, right? If you have to buy summer clothes for your kids, that's going to increase. Filling up your SUV to go to the beach is going to be more expensive. Making sure people understand that we're going to be ultimately the ones that deal with this. About a year and a half ago, I did a poll within my district asking, does NAFTA help or hurt the Texas economy? Or I don't know. 33, 34.
No way. Wow. Yeah.
All right. And so
we all have work to do.
We all have work to do. And let's say we get through the current problem that we're dealing with now. That doesn't mean we have to stop. We have to continue. We have taken for granted the importance of the U.S., Mexico, and Canada building things together. And so to your question of this 5%, threat, what were folks in the district saying? They don't necessarily understand how that was going to impact them. And so I try to take the effort to explain to them, this is what it means for an everyday consumer. And this is why this is going to impact jobs like Toyota in San Antonio. And so we have to continue to educate people, and we need folks here in these border communities need to understand that the ad valorem taxes that are raised from the cross-border trade, as much of that money goes back into helping deal with the current crisis. Mm-hmm. So you're going to potentially impact that as well too. And so you're going to mess up global supply chains. And sometimes these are not issues that everyday folks have to deal with, but we have to make sure we're explaining to them how this is going to ultimately impact them. And so I take the perspective of what is the American consumer going to see and how is it going to impact them.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to add, because I think Will is right on the impact itself. But I think, folks like, see so many folks from the border here, of course, from some all over, Border Trade Alliance and the other groups. But I would have to say uncertainty. I mean, if you're a business person and don't know if, the next day, it's going to go up and what's going to happen. I've always said, if a president is going to threaten somebody that has a trade agreement, NAFTA 1.0, what's the purpose of having a trade agreement if a president can threaten somebody? I mean, the reason we have trade agreements, besides facilitation of trade and lowering tariffs and duties and getting rid of all this, obstacles, is to have certainty over a period of time. So in the middle of this, a president comes in and lobs in and says, I'm going to raise it 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, because you're not doing your job, Mexico, then it just provides this uncertainty. It's like Mexico. I mean, the president's trying to put the burden on Mexico to stop the migration. Well, we know that we have to change asylum laws. We know we have to do certain things here, but they're putting it on Mexico. It's like Mexico saying, we got this violence in Mexico because of the billions of dollars and the guns that you send back over there. So, Mr. President, we're going to put a tariff on you if you don't get rid of your drug consumption. I mean, that's what they're doing. They're shifting over responsibilities on this, but you got to have certainty. If you're handling trade, and you got this people that are looking at this, it causes uncertainty, and this is what the president does. And what the president did, he got a economic issue, a trade issue, and combined it with an immigration issue. And I can understand he was trying to use the leverage over here, saying, the Mexican economy is smaller than the U.S. economy, so he's trying to bully in many ways, the Mexicans. Say, if you don't do this, we're going to put a tariff on this, but you know very well who's going to pay for it. I've always said, if you want to have a crisis on the border, put the tariffs on avocados and beer, Corona, whatever the case may be, and that's a crisis at the border. But I mean, this is what we're looking at. I was serious. Yeah. I'm just kidding. No, but I mean, this is what we have to understand. You can't treat people like that. Your numbers, I think the Wilson Center, and we always use it. Look, if something comes in from Europe or China, what is it, 4 or 5% American parts. Something comes in from Canada, it's about, 24, 25%. Something comes in from Mexico because of the supply chains that we have, especially automotives, 40%. So if you're going to put at 40%, you're going to be hitting the American consumer. The supply chain is very, very different when it comes to Mexico. And that's what understands when somebody can't understand this and saying, well, I know we got a trade agreement and we're going to go ahead and add this, it provides this uncertainty. And then finally, what we're trying to move forward on trying to get the House to move forward on the trade agreement, and a lot of us will spend a lot of time on this, and we are going to have a vote, and we are going to pass the new agreement. What we're trying to do this also, and the president throws this in. And on top of that, what was it a little bit before that? We're going to close the border. Remember that? So it's a tariffs, closing the border. And then what did he do? He did it another way. He moved the CBP officers, I think 300 out of the 545 from the Laredo district, which is from Del Rio down to Brownsville. 300 of them out of the 545. And again, what was the rationale? Well, I talked to, I had sent 5 recommendations to the CBP commissioner on a Friday. And on Sunday, he became the acting secretary of Homeland. And I said, here are 5 ways we can address this, but why are you taking folks, well, they're the closest down there. And again, listen, I know humanitarian care, it's very important, and we all support this, but is it the job of a professional that's supposed to be inspecting cargo or tourism to be changing diapers, making sandwiches, taking people to the hospital? No, it's not that. So what we've done is, or even Border Patrol, 40% of the time, what are they doing? Paperwork, not being at the border. So you're taking people from the ports, the men and women in blue, the men and women in green, away from the from the border, to change diapers. There's a video that we got. I mean, there's people doing all this. It's important work. But it's not the job of those responsible, on that. So what we did in appropriations, we did a couple things. In January, we added 1,200 new CBP officers. In this appropriations, there's another 1,200 CBP officers. And I wanted 1,000, but I got 200, but we'll get started with that. So we got this, I'll call it entry-level tech positions for Border Patrol. We'll do that for CBP. So those are folks that can do almost anything except carry a gun. They become a pool for them to hire them later on. But their job is to help on the humanitarian care. And that way we don't take people away. And that's, this is what Will understands very well. I understand because we're at the border. Yeah. We don't come in and spend 1 hour and say, I know the border very well. I mean, and that's what happens is people coming in and their solution is wall, National Guard, a Border Patrol. That's it. And we got to go beyond that. And that's why when we get this information or we understand the border, we spend the time, we can understand and address it better.
Look, Henry's absolutely right. There's a couple of points I just want to elaborate on. Look, we all know what Border Patrol, ICE, Customs are doing. They're overworked. They're underpaid. They are getting attacked for in their communities for policy decisions that are being made up here, and that's just wrong and unfair. And this is why, again, Henry and I have worked to reform some of their pay, make sure they're getting paid appropriately. But there are some structural problems within DHS that is exacerbating this problem. Right. In a sector, there's no one person in charge. You have a senior Border Patrol, you have senior Customs, you have senior ICE. Why do all 3 of them have separate transportation contracts? They have a contract with a G4S where they should not have a Border Patrol agent or a Customs officer off the bridge having to transport people from point A to point B. They have a contract with G4S where they should be making the sandwiches and changing diapers. And so why are these tools that they already have not being used efficiently? And part of the problem is because you do not have a senior DHS person who can call all the shots for all the elements within DHS within that sector. That has always been a problem, and that problem is only exacerbated when you're dealing with the crisis that you're dealing with now. Here's where the conversation should be. We should not be talking about 5%. We should not be talking about uncertainty along our border. We should be talking about how are we using North American competitiveness to go after other markets and deal with China. China is the real threat to our broader economy, not just in the U.S., but entire North America. They are stealing our technology. They're dumping steel. They're even dumping cotton, in a strange way. And so the real threat is, and the Chinese are trying to surpass the United States by 2049 as the sole superpower in the world. That's not my opinion. That's not what I've learned from collecting intelligence as an undercover officer in the CIA. That is what they have said themselves, and that is their plan. And you have an emperor in China who has a plan in order to get there. And while we're playing, and treating our neighbors like our enemies, when we should be treating our neighbors as allies in order to deal with this broader problem. So we should be talking about how do we move global supply chains away from China and do that into Mexico and Canada so that we can then be competitive, even more competitive in Africa, in Europe. That's where the conversation we should be having. And for this group, we need to widen this group up to more than just border communities. We need to make sure, I always use my friends at Rossini as an example. They employ thousands of people in Ohio and Michigan, and guess what? Those communities don't know Rossini is a Mexican company. So we need to make sure that the Mexican companies are creating thousands of jobs in these communities, and so we need to make sure that we're broadening the group of people here that benefit. 26 states, their number one and number two trading partner is Mexico. We need to broaden that room, those folks up here, because those are the folks that should be additional allies on this trilateral relationship.
And if I can close up, and the ambassadors here, and that's one thing that this new has been doing a lot, is bringing in these companies, because, a lot of the sidewalks that you walk on, probably by a Mexican company, Cemex, or the bread that you eat. People might not understand Bimbo, but they understand Sara Lee.
Yeah.
Or a lot of people don't understand that the last nail company in the Midwest, the American company that was going to close, the last nail company, was saved by a Mexican company. There's a lot of things that people have no idea. And I always say, did you know that there's a lot of Mexicans coming to the U.S. and they'll look at me? Yeah, I said 2 years ago, and notice I used 2 years ago, Mexico was sending over 19 million Mexicans, tourists that were coming over. Over $20 billion that were spent at our hotels, restaurants, malls, and all that. Over $20 billion. I think we've now lost over $1 million, because if you call people rapists, murderers, and all that, they're going to say, oye, voy a otra parte, no voy a los Estados Unidos. It's only common human dignity that if you call me something, it's going to happen. But anyway, this is what we need to do, like you said. But let me just say something. You hear all this rhetoric, but let me tell you what you're all doing at the border on a day-to-day basis is working. Let me give you a couple examples. We see Pat over here, Kansas. You and I started working on international cruise and talking about what we started off. There were some people in my party that didn't like that. International cruise were important in Laredo for the trains. Let me tell you why. You have trains going south. You have trains going north. Laredo is number one in trucks, trains, and buses in the country. So trains are important to us because when they're going south and they're doing the inspections of the middle bridge and doing the crew change, should I say, and you have a train, it's going to provide blockage of streets for a long time. It does. So it affects people. So what happened is we worked on it. I had a GAO report. We did some work, and then they worked on it. So now we have international cruise. So that's important for the local community. And I know when my Teamster friends came over, they sent some folks over, and I'll be very honest what they said. They said, and I was there with one of my staffers, Juan Sanchez from Laredo, and they started off, this and this, it's bad, all this. It's just, by the way, a lot of those Mexicans, this is what they said, they got issues with drugs and they don't speak English. And we looked at it and said, boy, this meeting is going to be a quick meeting on that. Do they know Enrique Roberto Cuellar or Juan Sanchez? Who are you talking to? And then another one said, well, what y'all have problems in Laredo is you don't have enough overpasses. You know what it would take, how much millions of dollars to build an overpass for the trains? Seriously? So what's going to happen is we're going to be able to do that and get more trains. And that means they're going to buy more supplies, more jobs. And when they're saying that it's going to cut jobs, what is it, 70 or 30-something jobs at $70,000? I mean, that is more union members for them. So we got that. Joint inspections. Start off in Laredo. I know we got it over at Sam's, and we got it other places. I want to see the Mexicans come over and do the joint inspections, and we need to do a lot more of that. So we're doing that. And in appropriations, we added a lot of things. We added a border infrastructure inspector, a coordinator that will work with CBP, GSA, and work with the Mexicans so we can coordinate a lot more. Yesterday, I had to walk out of the Border Trade Allowance because I had the CBP commissioner and the GSA director to talk about a center of excellence for CBP and for for our folks with GSA, because I'm saying, why do we have to get all these things, especially with donations, and you have to get this signature, you have to do this. Let's expedite things. So we'll have a center of excellence for GSA and CBP to work together. They're both on it. They're both supported, the border infrastructure coordinator. So we're doing a lot of things to make sure that we can get the job done. So you might hear all this rhetoric up here, but you all, with folks like us and Senator John Cornyn, we're working on making sure we make it work on that, because trade is not going to stop. It's going to continue increasing.
I'd really like to take some questions from the audience, but Congressman Hurd, if you want to come in here with something.
Quick point. On USMCA, we're going to need y'all's help in order to get this passed. Henry is twisting as many arms as he can on the Democratic side. We're going to probably need about 37 Democrats. And ultimately, what some of our colleagues are saying is they want to see enforcement provisions within labor. What does that mean? Show us the language. Get that information to us. And so when you're having these conversations up here on the Hill, especially with my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, not Henry, of course, and not Vicente Gonzalez, and not Ron Kine, because these are folks that understand this. What is your specific request? Because I've asked for the language of what they want to see included in the USMCA when it comes to labor enforcement, and we haven't gotten it. So at this point in time, we should know what that is, if that's your alternative. And so we're going to have probably about 37 Democrats in order to pass this, and it's going to require efforts by groups like this and many of y'all here in the room to make sure we push that along.
Democrats want four things, as you know: labor reform, enforcement, environment, and pharmaceuticals. Mexico has nothing to do with pharmaceutical. That was a U.S. pharmacies. That's a different thing. But anyway, those are the four things. There's a working group. Nancy Pelosi told me when she was down there in Laredo, we had her there earlier this year, and she, they asked her the question, and she knew where she was at. And she said, listen, they asked her about NAFTA. She said, look, I voted for the original NAFTA. There were some promises on labor that were not kept, but, we're going to get there. So, my thing, as you know, she put a working group together. They met last night, and she knows what she's doing. She will put it to a vote. I hope it will be in July, but if not, hopefully around September. I prefer July, but we'll let the process work. It will be put there. We will have the votes. We will have the votes there. We will have the votes. But like any trade agreement, it's got to be bipartisan. No party has ever voted for a trade agreement by themselves. None. It's always bipartisan. Sometimes there's more Republicans than Democrats. I understand that, but it's a process that Pelosi knows, and she will put it to a vote, and we will get it done. But as you said, a lot of people say, "Oh, we're talking to folks." No. Tell us exactly where they're at. Yeah. We need to know, because as you know, for trade votes, it's a very tricky vote. But I would tell you, it's a very different type of circumstance. One, you have Mexico. Historic changes. So Democrats ought to be jumping up and down and said, exactly. We got what we wanted in the 1990s, right? Enforcement, you already have a plan. We just got to work a little bit more in the appropriations part of it, but they have a plan how they're going to enforce it. And we need to make sure Democrats see that. On the environment, it's very simple. Nat Bank. Yeah. That's what we need to do, work on Nat Bank. So what I've done is I've talked to Maxine Waters, and she's going to move it. We just need to find the time. Or, as I told the trade representative and the Speaker's office and the Ways and Means, put it in the implementing language. Yeah. And that would be the best way of doing it. So now I got a call from the Nat Bank. They got a meeting with the Ways and Means. So I hope that that's good. So we got 2 vehicles, one over here, and I know that you've been working on it. I appreciate your good work on that, Noe. And we are going to do it. And then finally on the enforcement, I said, well, the speaker was a member at that time in the 1990s. She's now the speaker. So you can put the language in there to enforce it. But I have to say, the U.S. Trade Representative Robert has done a heck of a job. And he's got a lot of things that Democrats should be jumping up and down and said, these are the things we wanted in the 1990s. We have them now. And the Mexicans, especially on the historic labor reform, have gone, they've just done a great job. And let me just give you a couple of things. I'm now the new U.S. Mexico Interparliamentary Chair. So I took a group of people there, including I specifically asked, Speaker's office, staff, I want you to come with me. Yes. The Ways and Means staff, yes, they went with me. And then I also invited AFL-CIO.
Is that why I got bumped?
No. And what I did on purpose, because, AFL-CIO and I have had differences on trade agreements. They're friends of mine, but we think differently on trade. So they went. I invited them to every single meeting. And I said, hey, I got a couple questions. Speaker's office, you ask all the questions. Ways and Means, ask all the questions. AFL-CIO, you ask all the questions. Y'all answer the questions. So when they came back, I had been sending dear colleague letters to the Democrats, and I got asked to hold off on this for a little while because the process is moving. I said, okay, I'll hold. But it went from labor reform to what? Enforcement. Yeah. Because the folks that went down there, they said, boy, the Mexicanos did a great job. And they actually did. They did a great job. So, and the enforcement will get there. And again, we will have a vote on that.
Yeah, let's get to it. We have time for an audience question?
I think we have time for, I'm going to take 3 questions very quickly. And there's a hand up right here. There's a hand up over there. So that's 2. I don't see the third hand. The third hand right here. There we go. So if you don't mind introducing yourself and making your question as concise and coherent as possible.
We only take yes and no's and maybe questions.
Okay, I can frame that as a yes or no.
Just kidding.
Marilee, International Trade Today. I wondered, in the implementing language, or in any other vehicle, is there any way to clarify Congress's intention on tariffs and IEEPA to give certainty with passage of USMCA so that there can't be a 5 or 10 or et cetera tariff in 3 months when the numbers haven't fallen enough?
Okay. Take another one, or do you want to
right now? I'll just say this. My preference is to have something like that, but keep in mind that even the implementing language, it's got to be driven from the House, and it's a Democratic majority, but we still got to work with the Senate Republicans and our Republicans in the House and the White House. So whatever comes out is going to be a negotiated in many ways. So I think I know what the White House position will be on this. But if I had it my way, you're right. We cannot keep getting these threats every single time he feels that things are not going his way.
The short answer is it depends. And I think Henry is absolutely right. There's many of us that want to make sure that Congress takes back much of its authorities when it comes to this. Yeah. And previous Congresses before Henry and I were ever in Congress gave that up. And so the question is, are there enough votes to ultimately get something like that? And at this point right now, I do not know, and whether that would actually sacrifice the broader deal. These will be the questions that are being discussed as we talk about implementing language inside deals.
Thank you. Gentleman over here. Yes.
Richard Coleman, CBP, retired. What are the outlines of the reform for asylum, and what are the sticking points? Is money an issue, or how are the parties working together on that?
So I have, there's a couple pieces of legislation out there to do this. Ultimately, when it's commonly accepted that you apply for asylum in the country next, in the contiguous country that you're leaving, you have to be one of 5 protected classes, and you have to be persecuted by the government or a group. And when you're being persecuted by that group, you have to prove that the government is unwilling or can't protect you. And Henry's right, only about 12% of people are actually getting granted asylum. And so if you skip If you can apply for asylum in multiple other countries before you get to our borders, and then you come in between our ports of entry, that's not an indication that you're truly claiming asylum and that you are trying to game the system. And so saying that you can't do that is one of the initiatives that I'm working on. The question is not about money. I think we do need, ACLU did a report back in 2016 that said you needed 536 immigration judges to deal with the backlog at that time. That number is probably even higher. We should be able to do a immigration case under a year. You can probably do it under 9 months. So you have to reduce the time to do that. That is not necessarily even a money issue either. It is hiring those immigration judges because, as Henry said, we've gotten that in legislation to do that. So those are kind of the lines of effort. But until we get past this issue of the current budget crisis and DHS going to run out of money this summer, it's going to be difficult to talk about how you reform asylum laws until after that case.
Yeah, and Will's correct on that. Just to add a little bit more, Senator Cornyn and I have filed this Humane Act. If you want to look at it, we do address some of those issues. The problem is there's folks that want to go to the extreme left and folks that want to go to the extreme right. And if we would just target on the low changes that we need to make, we can do a much better job. Immigration judges, like I said, I've been working on this for a while, and I had disagreement with the Obama administration and now the Trump administration. As I said, people are released, they put judges over there. Then they say, well, yeah, there are some cases on the border. There's really not a, quote, a lot of business on the border. I said, really? I said, where are these people coming from? So, the problem is, I think since I've been working on it, 315 judges that we've added. There's another 100 coming in on the appropriation bill. For a while they had more judges. I think they had 26 more judges than court spaces. So we added language and money for GSA so they can do turnkeys and move on this a lot quicker. They have what they call floating judges. Floating judges, they said, we'll wait for a space so we can go in. I said, seriously? Judges are busy. Then the other thing I said, hey, do you all remember a show called Night Court? Why do you have to stop at 5 o'clock? There are certain cases that you can handle. Folks are detained. There's a lot of things that, we need to do. And the other thing is a very simple thing. I told folks this is the best way, one of the best ways to address this. Better than the wall. If a judge sits and listens to a case and they say, okay, where are you from? Guatemala, for example. Or I'll use the folks, last time when I had the speaker down there in Laredo, it was somebody from Georgia. Not the state of Georgia, the country of Georgia. So I asked, are you asking for asylum, through interpreters? Oh, yes, credible fear asylum. They all have the language. Mm-hmm. They've been coached, part of the money they pay. So how did you get here? Tbilisi, the capital, Istanbul, Brussels, Mexico City, Nuevo Laredo, I want asylum. If the judges would just ask this question, kind of like, how did you go? So you can use that, but even with Guatemala. So you passed Mexico, and I'm not talking about the third safe country. I'm not talking about that. But you went through Mexico? Yes. Does Mexico offer asylum? Yes. Did you have an opportunity? Yes. I spent so many days, all that. So then why your relief or your fear should be gone because you had opportunities. Why is the U.S. the only place that you can do this? If the judges would do that, you would take care of this. But again, I always say this. If you don't hold them at the border, give them their day in court, and have ICE, air, or whatever the case might be, go off. And what's happening right now is this is what we got to work with the Mexicans. Folks coming in from certain countries, what are they saying? Some of them, we're stateless, right? So Mexico, well, what do we send this folks? But the moment they come to the U.S., I'm from this country, I'm from this country, I'm from this country, I'm coming from this country on that. This is what we got to work together. But the immigration judges, and we've added money for technology. We add them to work with the same computer system with the Department of Justice. We've asked them to work night courts. I mean, come on, guys. We got to do something. If it's a crisis, then act like if it's a crisis, not go. And the judges work extremely hard. I think now the latest is they probably have to get to 750 judges so they can start bringing the backlog. We're over, 900,000 now? When I started working on this, adding judges, it was 500 something. We're now at 900, almost 900,000. And we gotta just use common sense. So a lot of it is, we can do a lot of it within the budget or within the system. We would just focus on the right things on that. And if we do immigration, and I want to see full immigration reform, I believe in dreamers and all that. But on this issue, we would focus just very targeted on a couple of things instead of throwing in diversity and throwing in this and throwing, no. Focus on what we need to do, we could address this issue a lot faster.
And use the full law as it's written now. The law is written now that the individual adjudicating the asylum claim can take the credibility of the person making the claim into account. And so there's so many elements that when you can tell that they're not a credible person, that you do not have to proceed with that asylum case. That is the way the law is written now, and I do not know why that section of the law is not being taken advantage of.
So I know we got one last question,
one more
but listen, there's different numbers out there. I'll use that from the immigration courts. In fact, tomorrow I'll sit down with James McHenry, who's the head of the immigration courts, and I'll say, hey, we provide all this in appropriation. But let me ask you this, or let's look at this. If you look at it, if you have 100 people using their numbers, 88% are going to be rejected, right? Then the ones who are released 2, 3, 4, 5 years, wherever they get a court hearing, right? 44% of them don't show up, okay? Their numbers, 44% of them don't show up. And then on top of that, how many cases, and I know the president says he's going to deport millions next week. It ain't going to happen. The resources are not there. But do you know that there are over 1 million final deportation orders that are just there? So ICE has to work on the criminals, and you keep adding the final deportation orders down here, over 1 million cases on that. Know what I mean? There's a low common sense to address this issue we ought to use common sense instead of political strategy.
Thank you.
On both sides.
I'm terribly sorry to our friend here, but we've actually run out of time, and people need to imbibe caffeine at some point. Although you have both been incredibly stimulating, let me add that.
That's good.
You've given us a masterclass, gentlemen. Thank you very much. And it may sound like a platitude, but people often talk about borders separating. I have to say that the border in this case and in this event brings people together, and we need a lot more of that. So thank you very much for being with us, and we hope to see you again soon.
Thanks for having us.
Good job.